Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK12 team, and my colleague Katie and I are going to be running today's webinar called Customizing Practice. We are so glad that you all have joined us today. Before I introduce you to CK12 and we start talking about customizing practice, I want to review a few things about the Zoom webinar platform. You guys should be seeing two different windows in the Zoom webinar platform, one for Q&A and one for chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK12, please post it in the Q&A window. The chat window is the place where we'd love for you to have a community conversation. This is where you can introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, feel free to share where you live, the subject that you teach. Just make sure in the chat window that you are sending any general posts to all panelists and attendees. You've got to change that from the default. So it'll go to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see what you're posting in the chat window. While we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you're having any trouble with your video or your sound, please let us know in the Q&A or the chat window. Okay, so quickly, for those of you who may not be as familiar with CK12, just a little bit about us. The CK12 Foundation, founded in 2007, is a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to improving student learning by increasing access to educational materials through the Flexbook platform and concept-based modalities. CK12 offers free, high-quality, standards-aligned, open content through an integrated set of tools for learning, including digital textbooks, concept-based learning resources, simulations, interactive practice, and more. And like I just said, we give it all away for free. Our core content and curriculum is for middle school and high school math and science, with some K-5 math practice and videos and science texts. However, with the addition of donated resources and user-created content, you'll also be able to find books for other subjects and levels, especially related to social studies and to English. So while today's topic focuses on our adaptive practice system, I wanted to show you this page. If you are interested in seeing an overview of all of the resources CK12 has to offer, this is a great page to get you started. It's ck12.org/overview, and you'll see additional information about our Flexbooks, our concept-based learning, other things that you may want to explore. Okay, so right now I'm going to introduce you to Katie, and she's going to get you started with today's content on customizing practice.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone who joined us today for our session on customizing practice. In our Groups in Practice 101 session, we covered the basics of our adaptive practice system along with classes and reports. If you missed that session, I highly encourage you to watch the recording in our archived webinars or join us for a practice and assignment session this summer during our Certified Educator program. In this particular webinar, we'll be covering the following topics: customizing CK12 practice into quizzes, so kind of the difference between quizzes and quiz settings, and then creating your own questions in Math Editor, so option settings and math formatting. And finally, multi-concept assignments and what that means in terms of reports within CK12. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand the difference between practice and CK12 quizzes, and you can create your own customized assignments and questions and know what reports would look like for each on CK12.
Okay, but before we really get into all this core content, let's find out a little bit more about you all and your knowledge of our practice tool and options for customizing practice. So we're going to launch a poll that you'll see here in just a few seconds. And there it is. You should be seeing it on your screen. And we are asking you to let us know, what experience do you have with customizing CK12's adaptive practice into quizzes or using multi-concept assignments? And you've got a few options there. The first one is, I am new to CK12's adaptive practice. I use CK12's adaptive practice. I have customized CK12's adaptive practice into quizzes. And I've created multi-concept assignments within CK12 class groups. So I'm going to give you guys a second to answer those, and your answer just kind of helps to give us a better idea of who is on our webinar today and helps us focus our content and how we're going to address some of your questions. So I'll pause for just a few more seconds while you guys finish answering. Okay, why don't we go ahead and share those results? Okay. Perhaps as I would expect for you guys joining a webinar, we've got the majority of folks who are new to CK12's adaptive practice. And that's great. Hopefully, we're going to give you all kinds of ideas of how you can start using that in your classroom. For those of you who have already used adaptive practice or have customized adaptive practice, you should be able to pick up some additional tips and tricks throughout here of how to make that all go more smoothly in your classroom. So this is great. We're really glad that you guys are all here. And I think that's my last question for you. And Katie, let's get them started.
Great. So let's start by talking about adaptive practice versus quizzes. We're going to kind of talk about both of them and then the difference between the two of them as we move forward. So to start, what is the advantage of both using either CK12's adaptive practice or what we call quizzes? So put it in quotation marks just because you can use it as a quiz or as a regular assignment. But the biggest thing is that we have over 150,000 questions in our database. They're mainly math and science questions, so those are kind of the core areas that you would be able to see those. And you can pull from those when you're making quizzes, or our adaptive practice will pull from that as well. These can be quick assigned using our assign to class feature, which I'll be sure to show you. Reports for them include the time they spent on the questions, the level of questions, the answers, and more. Students can access them online or via our CK12 practice app. And then hints are available for both of them, and you can choose whether or not to use them within quizzes. So now the differences. Adaptive practice adjusts to a student's skill level. So if you missed our general groups and practice session, it basically gives them harder questions if they're doing well and easier questions if they're doing poorly. And then if they're really struggling, it will stop them and actually recommend that they read something or watch a video or do an interactive before they continue with practice, just to kind of strengthen those skills. So those are the recommendations, those modality recommendations. And then the goal is to get 10 correct. It also saves their progress as they go. So students can pick up where they left off. If they got maybe 3 correct today, they can try some more and still get to that goal of 10. The next part is our quizzes. So for quizzes, we have the part where you can set a specific number of questions from there. So they are handpicked by the teacher. You can actually include your teacher created questions.
Sorry, Katie, I'm having technical difficulties here.
No worries.
Okay, there we go. I think
Perfect.
I see it now.
So you can pick the number and specific questions. You can write your own questions and include those in your quizzes. Instead of having a goal of 10 correct, which would give a student 100%, the report is based on the total out of kind of how they did. So let's say if you had 20 questions and they got 10 correct, they would get a 50%. And students start from the beginning. So that's something where if they do the assignment, they need to complete the assignment from beginning to end. You can set unlimited tries so they could reset that if they wanted to. And for that quizzes, you can turn off the hints. So that was that part that they're available for both, but you have the option to turn them off in the quiz section. So I think with that, I'm gonna steal the screen from Lindsay, and we're gonna go live on CK12, and we're gonna walk through some of this idea of customizing content. So this is our homepage. If you log into CK12 and you end up on your dashboard, you can always go back to the homepage by clicking on the CK12 icon. And then if you're, say, exploring practice by going through our explore option for all of adaptive practice, and you picked a topic. So let's say grade 3, and then difference of whole numbers to 1,000. So here, this is what a student would have. They'd get that start practicing option. They'd have some resources maybe to check out. At the lower level, there's those video resources for math. You as a teacher could quickly assign this to your class or download it as a worksheet. And then today we are talking about customizing. So I could click the customize option here. So that's one choice. The other way to get to that customize option is if I was back in CK12 and I went to a concept, either through search or browsing. So let's say I'm going to pick trig and maybe right triangle trig. I like 45, 45, 90 triangles. So I could get to that concept page. So for those of you new to CK12, this is called a concept page. It includes all of the different modality types or different types of resources. So a study guide, video, our text page, our Plix Interactive. And if I pick the one on practice, it takes me to the practice page. And that same option to customize is now on the left side of our practice. So regardless of how you access this, you have some options for customizing. That worksheet option is here as well. And this create new questions part, we're going to talk about in the second part of the webinar today. But let's just try customizing. So if I click customize, I want to make this my own quiz. And it brings you to our quiz editor page. So I can then use this. Once I've created this, I could find it in my library. I could find it in my assignment. So all sorts of options to access this on the flip side, and we'll kind of go through those as we work our way through. But let's say this is my quiz, trig quiz for the May 9th webinar, just so I know what I'm looking at. And you can see that I can rechange the name, which will be super helpful instead of just untitled some random number when I'm looking to find it. I might even add a description for this. So that could be useful if you're trying to remember, wait, what is this quiz about? What did I include in it? So feel free to choose that. You can actually set the time limit for the whole quiz. So you could say, I want my students to complete that quiz in a 30-minute period, and they get as far as they get in that time, or it kind of defaults to unlimited. They also have the option for number of attempts. So that's the case where if you actually wanted to use it as a quiz, you could choose this and pick a number of attempts. So maybe 1 or 2 in case there are any issues that they wanted to redo it. Or you could say you can do it up to 15 times, or doesn't really matter. Just keep taking it until you pass it. And then here's some options. I can show my hints, or if I'm giving it as a quiz, choose to deselect that. I could show the solution if I wanted to, and this is after they answer the question. So it's not available for timed quizzes, just to let you know, so that they don't waste all their time doing that. But if you forget things here, the little eye icon is sometimes helpful. And then shuffle questions. This might be super useful if you were giving it as a quiz, or if students were all kind of doing it at the same time and you wanted them to get the same questions, but get them at a different time, so that they weren't, question 2, answer C is not question 2, answer C for another student. So all sorts of kind of general options. And then you get down into the actual questions themselves. So here I have the 45, 45, 90 right triangle subset. We have in our database 104 questions for that topic. And so we just said, okay, maybe you want to start with 20. You can change this and say, I only want them to get 15 questions on this quiz. And this will warn you that it's going to reset any earlier changes. So just make sure if you're changing that number that you want the system to kind of pull 15 new questions from that piece. And by changing this number here, our system automatically pulls 15 random questions and gives them to all of the students being assigned this piece. If you yourself want to personally access and change those questions, then you can click on this nice little edit option. Our little pencil icon is what gives you that edit option across our site. And you'll see a number of choices. So I set it at 15. So the system pre-chose 15 questions. You'll see there's a mix of easy, medium, and hard in there. I can reorder these. I can say I want this question first. If you have chosen the shuffle question option on the previous page, the order is not going to matter, so it's not going to let you reorder them. So just make sure if you're trying to set them in a specific order that you don't choose that option, that you make sure that the order matters. If you're looking to try out on these questions, you can just kind of flip them down and check out what these look like as you're working your way through. And you can say, I don't really like that question, or let's see what this question looks like. Maybe I'm going to add that one in there. So I can add that question in. So all sorts of options in terms of choosing the number, the general number, either having CK12 pick it from that first screen, choosing, I don't want that question or that question or that question, that's fine. Kind of picking your own. Right now we're at 13 out of 104 questions. All sorts of options in terms of ordering and the numbers and selecting those questions. But once you've finished choosing your own questions that you want in here, then you would just save this part. And so now it says 13 out of 104. If I choose to change this number again, it will reset all of those chosen questions. So just make sure that you either pick the number you want and we can randomly pull, or you pick your own individual questions and then don't change the number afterwards. So just be aware of that, kind of how that process works. Now, let's say I wanted a quiz that included all special triangles. So not just 45, 45, 90, but I also wanted to include 30, 60, 90. So I could add another concept to this quiz by clicking on the Add Question Set. And I can simply search for that concept. So 30, 60, 90, oh, there we go, great. I'm gonna add that concept to here. We have some questions that are taggable to geometry and trig. So I'm gonna pick the trig option and I'm going to select that. And now it added it here. Once again, it defaulted to kind of the 20 question starting place there's 84 questions in that question set. I can do the same thing. I can go back in and I can order and I can choose exactly which questions I want for that part. And I can even change which I want to come first. So let's say I want them to do the 30, 60, 90 first. I would just pick this order for this box and I would move it over, and then those questions come first and the second batch of questions is that. And once again, kind of once I pick all my questions, I can simply click shuffle if I wanted them to get questions in a random order within the quiz itself. So all sorts of options. If I update this quiz, now it has all of those pieces. I could go back to practice, I could preview it, say what is this gonna look like, and you start seeing the questions just like a student would see it if they were accessing that piece. And so we talked about, okay, well, where can I find this quiz now? So I can find this quiz in my library. If I click on my library option, that's where anything that you have customized and made lives. So here we see the quiz that we created. I can click on it again, and then I can even edit this quiz from here. As I said, we'll talk about creating new questions. I can assign that quiz to my class from here. So accessing it definitely from that particular piece is totally accessible. You can also access it, let's say you're on the concept again. So if we went back to 45, 45, 90 right triangles. See if we can get that up. This is actually the geometry one. So we have some practice options here. You could say community contributed. There's some reads, there's some study aids there as well. I think I accessed it from here, so let me go back and do the trig one cleanly. And you can once again see our practice, or now you can see this assessment option, and here's the quiz that you made for trig. So just know that under the community contributed tab is anything that other users have made, and if you made your own quiz, you'll be able to see your quiz there. That just shows up within your account. There's not really a way to publish that quiz and share it, but you as a user could access it from that modality page, just like kind of where you pulled it from to start. So 2 options to find your content, either through there. I think it's way easier to find it directly in your library. And you can even kind of filter by type, say, I just want my quizzes. And these are all the fun quizzes and practice and assessments that I've created or that I've pulled into here. So that's just kind of the simple options for I start with a practice and I click customize and I make my own quiz. I could start from scratch here, the create new quiz, and it just wouldn't preset that first set of options. It just brings me to a completely blank quiz option. So if you know what you want to start with, click customize. If you want to do it from scratch, within your library, the create new option works. So I think with that, we're going to pause for a few minutes to see what questions you guys might have about the starting place. And then the second 2 parts of our webinar include the creating questions specifically, as well as kind of what the reports look like for this.
And just a few reminders for you all. Anytime that you have a question about anything that Katie's showing you on the screen, just type it in the Q&A window and we'll pause occasionally and we'll answer some of those questions. And then, you know, anything that you think the community would benefit from, type in the chat window. So Katie, we've got a couple of questions in Q&A right now. One is you were showing earlier about hints, and I think this is, can you choose to tick off the get a hint? maybe you could show that again.
Yeah, so when you're in the edit mode option here, you can just deselect the show hints. And if I did that and I previewed it now as a student, see if this loads, you'll see that it no longer has the hint option there. So a student wouldn't be able to see that piece. If you wanted to put it back, then you would just say, actually, I want them to see the hints, so I'm going to include it. I'm going to preview that. And now all of a sudden they have the option to get a hint. So definitely an option for you if your own choice. In our general practice, it's included, but for a quiz, you can deselect that choice and take those away.
Okay, and then a next question involves community content. I think some of our users maybe don't realize when they first come to CK12 that we have a lot of CK12 vetted, curated content. And then you'll also see some tabs throughout our different pages that say community contributed content, where you can see things that other teachers and educators have contributed. So one question is can everybody see the quiz that you just created in community content? Are they always public?
So the answer to that is no. Only the owner of the quiz will see that quiz in the community content piece. So if, for example, a coworker of yours is looking for this quiz, then they're not going to see it. You'd actually have to kind of share that directly. And so just make sure that you understand that quizzes themselves don't get published. And so therefore, you're the only one, if you own that, that can see it. The other stuff that you're seeing in this community content that other people have written are things that other users have made and chosen to publish. So you can publish a read, you can publish a study guide, you can publish some of our other modality types, and those will show up if they've been published, but quizzes don't have that option. So it's just a place where if you are searching through this, you can be like, oh yeah, I made a quiz. Awesome, I'll use that quiz. As opposed to forgetting about it in your library. But it's not something that other people will be able to see there.
Yeah, Katie was just showing you a couple different ways to access this. Personally, I would probably go to my library, and then like she showed you, you're able to filter on the side based on what you're looking for. So, you know, if you've been using CK12 for a year, 2 years, you're going to start to accumulate a lot of things in your library. So using that filter will narrow down what you're looking for. And while you're there, Katie, we have a question of, I see the archive option. Is there a way to delete a created quiz? Why don't you discuss what we mean about archiving?
Yeah, so archive basically takes it out of the thread of your library. There's not really a way to delete content from here. A quiz isn't really accessible to anyone anyways, except the teacher or the people that they've assigned it to. But because our system is set up where for other resources, you might, like if you share a book and then someone customizes and it goes from there, and then you want to delete your copy, but they're really still accessing some of that content that they haven't totally updated. There's not a clean way to delete content. There's just a way to put it aside so that you're no longer seeing it. And that way you don't have to see it within the feed of your library kind of and those resources.
Okay, and then a last question that we have here is about translating the language, which maybe we can show how we can translate our site, but then talk about maybe the limitations with adaptive practice.
Yeah, so our practice currently doesn't have a translate option. You'll see translate in a couple of places. So you'll see it, let's just pull up a read. So if I'm reading any kind of web page, so Darwin's Theory of Evolution, if I open this resource here, I can then choose the Google Translate option, which is at the bottom of our page. So let's go all the way down here. I can select the language and I can put it in whatever I'm looking for. So let's say Japanese. And then it translates the page into Japanese. And you'll see it kind of update all of that core content. That's a Google Translate option, so it's not a perfect translation. It's something that might be useful for a student where English isn't their first language and they'd want to be able to read that content. Our practice currently doesn't have that option embedded. At the same time, when we talk about creating questions shortly, I'm going to put that back in English so I can read it. You do have the option to write questions in any language you want. And so that's something where I've seen kind of on the back end of questions, just like questions in Portuguese and questions in all sorts of different languages that teachers have created in our system, and they've written them in their whatever language they're looking to use. And so that is currently an option. I think the other option right now in terms of accessing translated material is in our Sims. And we've partnered with a couple people that were interested in helping to translate those. And so you'll see some of our physics Sims have the option to access them in German or Korean. So that's another option, but the practice is not currently at that point.
Okay, we're gonna hang on to this other question that's in Q&A for the moment because it's about student reports, which I know Katie's gonna cover, probably in 10 or 15 minutes here. She's gonna show you all about student reports. So we're just gonna leave that in the Q&A list here. Again, all of you on the webinar, feel free to contribute your own questions. But Katie, why don't you go ahead and move on, and I'll let you know if there's any pressing questions.
Great. So the second part of this webinar is kind of that second part where we're going to create our own questions. So if I was in my quiz itself, which I just pulled from my library, I could choose to create new questions right from this practice, or I could edit this quiz. And within there, if I was editing a particular topic, let's see here. So if I'm in here and I want to write my own questions, I could click this add question option. If I do it from within a quiz, any new questions I add will show up directly below this choice. So if you're adding content to a Flexbook on our site, if you're adding questions to a quiz, they'll always show up directly below the last piece there. So that's one way to kind of go about and do that. The other option would be to add questions, just like, go back a couple of things, just like you saw the add question, create new questions for this, kind of from this piece. If I just went to a different topic, so let's say I searched weight and went into that practice. Once again, here's kind of your concept page. And from that practice, I'll see the option to create new questions. Just while I'm on here, if you're ever trying to embed practice elsewhere, you can pull your embed code from that nice little 3 dots at the bottom. But if I want to create new questions, I can click create new questions right here. And it brings you into our question editor. And so this is something that kind of has a number of different options to choose from. And I'm going to go over the core options today and then kind of reference a couple other ones. The first thing you want to understand is that we have a number of different question types. So I can choose a multiple choice question, which just means I have anywhere from 3 to, I think it maxes at like 6 or 7 answers. And a student is picking one choice within that list. So here you can see I could put a question prompt up here. And then I could add my answer and something that's wrong and something that's wrong. And I can just keep adding kind of extra choices. But you have to have, for a multiple choice question, you have to have at least 3 answer choices to use that particular question type. If I chose select all and apply, it would do the same thing. And it's going to reset my answer choices, but it gives me the option to choose more than one answer choice. So the select all that apply has the same limitations kind of as a multiple choice, but allows me to choose more than one answer. There's also a true false question type, and it just kind of resets the answers every time. And this will give you the choices for true or false, and I can actually change this. So I could put this as an answer and something that was not the answer here. So you could use true false as a multiple choice question with 2 kind of that binary choice option as you work your way through. So those are fairly standard question types. People have seen them across practice. So I'm not going to go through a lot of what you would put in there. I do want to talk about the difference between our short answer and our fill in the blank questions as well. So if I was going to do a short answer question, I would have a question prompt here, and then I would put my answer here. That's it. The answer doesn't come within the question. It doesn't go anywhere else. I could, let's say my answer was 1/2. I could also say I want 0.5 to be an answer choice. So you can add alternate answers in there for yourself that would also make sense in that particular piece. Those short answers come at the end. So a student would read the entire question and then they would hand type in their answers. And they basically get the choices of what's on a keyboard. Alternatively, I could choose the fill in the blank answer choice. And so this is one that if I wanted to write a larger question. So we were talking about weight. We just came in from the astronaut one. So if I wanted to use a fill in the blank option, I could say, actually I'll do a different one for that, but I could say something about like, what is the weight of an astronaut, and I can't spell, astronaut changes. And maybe I'd want them to fill in this blank right here. So I would just highlight that choice and click Add Answer. And then that would be where the blank shows up. And we'll show you some options for that kind of as I go through some other pieces. But just know that if you want the answer in between a piece, you'd want to put it within the question itself. There's two other kind of newer question types. So one is our highlighting question and one is our drag and drop. And I think we're going to build a couple different questions as we work our way through, just so you can see what these look like. The very last question here is a discussion question, which is a great place if you want to prompt them to write an essay or you want them to prompt them to do something else, but there's no right or wrong answer for that. So the discussion here, see how there's kind of not that choice to select which is correct. You could just say, you know, discuss this with others or write an essay or something to that effect. But if I wanted to choose, let's build a couple of these just so you can see what they look like on the other side. So I'm going to try our highlighting option. And we could say, I came up with kind of a sentence from one of our books. An astronaut weighs less on the moon than he or she would on Earth. And let's say I was working on a unit in English as well, and I wanted students to kind of highlight the nouns in the sentence. I could put my directions, highlight the nouns in this sentence, and then I would simply select those pieces. So I'd say I want them to highlight astronaut, I want them to highlight moon, I want them to highlight he as a pronoun, and I want them to highlight Earth. And all of those answer choices would be here. So that's kind of how you would build the question. If you wanted a full solution, less kind of relevant for something like this, but if I was building maybe a longer physics or math problem where there was steps involved, you could put the full solution, and that would be the like show solutions or not part. I could add hints in here. So I could add a hint to that part. And I could say, you know, don't forget the pronoun. And I could even add another hint. And then you can kind of add all these details. It's auto set to tag that question to the concept you started from when you were creating a new question. But you could add another one and delete that one as long as you've added another one to kind of replace it. And then you can reset the easy, medium, hard, add some standards or other components. And then you would submit this question. And let's see what it looks like. So I can kind of see what it looks like on all different options because students can do practice on a phone or not. The highlighting ones, let's say highlight the nouns in the sentence. So astronaut, moon. If I check it and say I got 2 out of 4 right, so there's probably 2 on there. I could try this again and check it. So I get kind of 1 out of 4 right, and it tells me if I selected something, if it's right or wrong. You do have to highlight the whole word, not kind of a part of a word. So just make sure you have spacing in there. So that is one. It's almost like thinking of it as a kind of circle the right answer question. And that way it's an option if you don't want a simple multiple choice question or a short answer. So I could go back and I could edit that, or I could say, I'm good to go. I'm just going to submit it. And I am done with that question type. So let's say I wanted to go into my library and add questions to my quiz, and we'll show some other ones, but I'll just kind of show them to you within that context so you can see what that looks like. And they're not all going to match this topic because I didn't write questions all for here. But if I was going to add another question, let's say we wanted to do a drag and drop question because that's a little bit different. And this is a categorizing question type. So I could say, sort the following based on whether or not they are metals. And then I would say my options are hydrogen, nickel, oxygen, nitrogen, and iron. And for anyone that I wanted an answer, say, okay, well, nickel is a metal and iron's a metal. So those are the 2 that I want to make sure I have in here. And my category 1 would be metals. And I'd add another category and I'd say non-metals And I can drag these ones in as I build this question. And then I can put the other ones in here and say, okay, here are some other options. And the students are going to drag those into the non-metals choice. The rest of the kind of building piece has options in terms of the solution and hints and all those parts. But if I submitted this question, let's see what that looks like for you guys. And it's really a sorting option. So I could say, that's a non-metal, that's a metal, mess a couple of these up. And if I check it, it tells me which ones were sorted correctly and which ones were not sorted correctly. Just be aware that a student, let's say if we wanted to preview this in kind of an iPhone. So if you think about it this way, a student who sees this in an iPhone is going to see them vertically. So it's not a fixed screen as they practice, but it's really a choice to categorize as you're working your way through. So let's update that, and we're done with that question. And as I said, when I'm looking for this question in my quiz now, I'm going to see it at the bottom of the questions I've picked. So here you can see the question that I just created for this particular topic.
Katie, sorry, while you're there, I was just going to say, one of our users is asking, when you create a new custom question, is it viewable by everybody or just by them at the bottom?
It's currently just viewable by you. So I'm logged in as a CK12 account, so it's reading CK12 as the author right here. If it was you that created it, it would have your name there, so you know which questions you made and which questions other people made. If you're creating questions, the same kind of licensing applies across our site. So you don't want to be adding questions that you bought from someone else to this database. But in terms of access to them, right now, you as the owner is the one that has access to them for your classes and for your quizzes. Did that answer the question?
We will find out. Related to that one, just while we're answering questions, I know you're going to show them a few more things about adding questions, but is there a way to see all of the custom created questions in one place, or are they truly just associated at the bottom of each quiz?
So they're associated with the quiz concept. So let's save this for a second. So when I create a question, I have to tag it to a concept in order to be able to use it. Because otherwise it's just kind of bouncing through there. So all of my questions would be kind of in that 45, 45, 90 right triangle concept if I created that, and I could find them and use them when I was making a quiz. So if let's save this for a second. That's fine. We're gonna go back. If I created a brand new quiz and I wanted to add a question set, and I wanted to add stuff from 45, 45, 90 triangles in Trig, then I would actually be able to see my questions here. So if I edit this, let's see, there's a whole bunch in here. So it might not show up right away, and it's going to be hard to tell because it's a CK12 one versus the other one. But somewhere in this list of questions is actually the question that I created. And so you'd be able to kind of go through them and see all of them. But as you can see, you can kind of look through the 105 questions. Oh, here it is, this last one, sort the following. And so the only time you would be using your own customized questions would be within a quiz itself. So you'd want to just pull up the concepts for the questions that you wrote. Otherwise, they're not kind of in one big place where you can see all of your questions because they're tagged to the individual concepts on our platform. Cool. With that, let's add another question here so you can see kind of the last funky question type. We talked about that fill in the blank option. This is a great way if you are trying to do a short answer. So let's say I want someone to write a third degree polynomial with roots 2, -1, and 3. And I could put all the restrictions in terms of, leading coefficient and all the rest of that. But if that's basically the question that I'm having to answer, and they're trying to put in y equals x to the third minus 4x squared plus x plus 6, like this whole long polynomial, if I try submitting this, it's going to actually say, wow, that was really fast. More than 3 words in the answer is not allowed for a short answer. So there's too many variables if you try to put really long answers in here that a student could, they could write it this way, they could write it with and without spaces. So we basically max out at 3 words for your open responses. But what I can do is I can take this and I can put it in here. And I could say, okay, I want you to fill in the pieces. So we're going to put like 1x squared. So they're going to fill in just the coefficients. So maybe we make this a plus, a -4, plus 1x plus 6. And then I could choose all these if I switch this to a fill in the blank option. And I can add this answer and this answer in here. And that way you don't have to worry about them messing up all the formatting. I can even make my 3 a superscript so it looks much better. And one thing to know, I'm keeping this kind of in basic text just because I'm having them answer some of this text within here. But if you were trying to do special math formatting, this math editor with the X and the curly brackets is a great resource. So I could click in there and I could do all sorts of fun formatting with integrals or, different signs, summations, matrices. And if you don't know LaTeX formatting, it will give you all these pieces and you can start filling stuff in. So just know, and I can preview that and say, oh, that looks like a great, matrix there. And so feel free to use that math editor anytime you're trying to do special formatting within here. But a student only has the ability to type in what's on a keyboard. So that is what their current options are. So let's save this, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So if I preview this question, they then get this piece and they say, okay, now I need to answer this piece. And as they, multiply it all out and solve, they would say 1. Let's say they forgot the negative sign for the 4, 1, and 6. And they could check it and say, okay, well, that's all right, except it was a plus, so I would need the -4 there. So all sorts of options kind of in different types as you're working your way through. And then I'm going to just do the last part in terms of the creating your own questions and then take some answers as we go through from here. If I was creating a question type, there's one other kind of amazing thing within CK12 if you wanted to build your own questions, and that's this concept of variables. And this can get super complicated, so I'm just going to tell you that it exists, that you can add a new variable, and then it's going to give you options in terms of choosing the restrictions on that variable. So if you want to create questions where all the numbers change every time you do it and do all that set, feel free to start playing around with that and seeing how it works. And if you want to stay on later, I can show you a little more, but that can get really complicated in terms of setting parameters. So just be aware that it exists, but that it's totally not necessary as you build your questions. So that's all the different parts of the building your own questions and previewing them and seeing them, reminding that they show up at the bottom of that quiz when you're editing it, or just available the next time you create a quiz when you're working on stuff. So that last one that I just created, once again, is at the bottom of the stuff I did. So, Lindsay, how are we doing on questions coming in?
We've got some. The first thing is, how do I create a quiz when there is not a pre-existing bank? From what page button do I begin? So just show them again, how can you get started creating a quiz?
So if you're trying to create something from scratch, anything, whether that's a book or a quiz or a video modality or anything like that, you can start from your library. I highly recommend that if you want to use something, if you want to customize something, or if you're using like the majority of a book, that you choose the customize option instead of creating from scratch. It saves you a ton of time. But you can start from creating new and choose a new book or a new quiz or a general modality option. And once I click that, it prompts me to my question page, and then I can add a question set. And then you would just kind of pick a topic from there and start adding questions into it. So that is how you would start from scratch.
Okay, so how about a quick speed round of, I don't think these require demonstrations, but you got your thinking cap on? All right,
yep, we're good.
Here we go. On drag and drop, can there be more drags than drop? For example, outliers and wrong responses.
No, there cannot, but you can add more categories that address that. So you can't use the same thing in 2 categories. So if you're trying to create like a, fraction, decimal, percent, you could put 3 different categories. If you're trying to create kind of, integers that include all these different parts, and you also want even ones. So even numbers, integers, all of those would fit together, but some of them might fit in both. And so you could do the kind of like part as you're working your way through. That's a really bad example because all the even ones would also be integers in there. But something where you had kind of an overlap as well. So if it's A, B, and then both of them, you would just create a third category to address that. Or in this case, those outliers like none of the above, and then they would just drag it in there.
Can we add rubrics?
In terms of grading rubrics, you would just kind of set them for your class. There's not a way to add them within this particular lesson. If they get a question right, they get full credit, so they get that point for that question. If they get it wrong, they get it wrong. If you're looking to be more fine-tuned, you could look at their answers and see how that worked out on the reports feature, which we will talk about as the next part of this webinar.
Yes. Can we add pictures in JPEG or GIF or video in the questions?
Yes. Let me just pick a random question topic and see if I can. Apparently multiplying sentences from illustrations was the first one that came up from there, but let's select this. And I'm just going to add a new question here so you can see what that looks like. So if I add this question, you get basically a very similar option to what you would get if you were working on a Flexbook in our system. So you get all of the formatting options here. And this insert edit image option will allow you to upload an image. I usually recommend uploading it instead of just linking to a URL. Because it's cleaner and it stays in there. Make sure you click the image options and cite it so that we know where it came from and that you have rights to use it. So upload an image or insert a kind of an embed link for a video, all sorts of fun formatting options in there.
Okay, can answers for numerical answer questions be a range to allow for rounding errors?
That is not an option. What you can do, so final zeros automatically round. So like 0.5 or 0.50 are both the same thing in our system. But a short answer, if you wanted to do like 2.53, you could say also 2.537 or something like that. And if you wanted that to round cleanly, you do that. If you also said, I don't really care if they drop it, you can put in those answers. So you can put in some of the alternate options that would address that piece. But it doesn't automatically do that for you.
Okay, I'm going to give Katie a quick talking break, and actually I'm going to steal the screen back, and I want to show you just this is just a minute or two video of one of our teachers in El Paso School District who we visited last year, and he had some really interesting ways of using quizzes in his classroom that I thought might be beneficial for some of you guys to hear. So here's just a quick video of Jonathan Waters, who is a math teacher in El Paso, Texas.
So the practice, and especially now with some of the updates, has become more adaptive to where the students are working on different questions. The more questions they get right, they seem to get more challenging. I've noticed as I go around help kids, question number 5 for one student is not question number 5 for another student. And as a teacher, it benefits me because it challenges the students to their level. I think I had a student earlier talk about how it's kind of adjusted to her and it kind of keeps her engaged. And then also, too, it helps me kind of see where these students are at. And then the quizzes I attach to the practices that come from that question bank, those tend to use the same questions for every student. But then again, at the same time, the real-time feedback is something I like, too. So the kids, they take the test, they know immediately what their grade is. They don't have to wait for me to grade a paper, grade an assignment, and then on top of that, they can go back and review and see, okay, I'm missing these types of questions, or I'm doing well on the medium type of questions, but I'm missing the hard questions. And so if they choose to, they can even go back to the practice and kind of work their way back to some of those harder questions.
All right. Keep your questions coming into Q&A. I know that there's a couple in there that I think we're going to get to here in a second, but we want to touch on the last part of this webinar, which is assignments with multiple concepts or quizzes. And we're going to talk about some reports in here as well. So in Groups in Practice 101, which is another webinar that you guys might want to check out sometime, we talked about how to quick assign practice or other modalities to any CK12 class. But today we're going to show you how to build a multi-concept assignment or include practice and quizzes within the same assignment. Oops, sorry, clicking too fast here. So these are things we're going to talk about. Assignments with multiple concepts or quizzes that you can create from CK12 class groups that students can access from the Practice app or within CK12 class groups. Students can choose the order to complete these assignments when you have a multi-concept assignment or quiz. And then the reports. Reports for assignments with multiple parts. They're split into multiple parts. Each part is based on the type of assignments. And anytime you have a practice, it's based on 10 correct. Quizzes, the score is going to be based on the percentage that they actually got correct on that. So just a reminder that the quick assign for other modalities is simply a check versus incomplete based on the access of a read or video or the exploration in the interactive. So when Katie takes over here, she'll kind of break all this down for you of how this works with our grading system.
Great, thanks, Liz. Lindsay. So if I continue my way through, let me share my screen again. So if I wanted to create a complex assignment in CK12, so this is if you're working within CK12 class groups, we make it super easy for you to kind of assign content in general. So I showed you that assign to class option. You saw that in practice. You can do the same thing for simulations and PLIX and other reads. And if you want to combine multiple concepts in one assignment, that's when you'd want to use kind of this multi-concept assignment option, and that exists within CK12 groups. So this will, if you notice, it says study groups will be discontinued as of May 31st. If you have any feedback for us on study groups, how they might have been useful for you, thoughts on what we should do for them, please feel free to email support or jumpstart@ck12.org. You can even post it in the chat window right now. So if you have kind of general concepts or comments on study groups, if you know what that is and you've used it, please let us know. In the meantime, we're going to focus on our class groups. So if I kind of just pick that classes, let's use my integrated grades one, because that way it'll have some report options in there as well. This is the groups environment, or what will become simply the class environment shortly in CK12. And I have some options within classes to make assignments and see those reports. So if I went to my assignments feature, I can see all of the assignments that I've assigned to this group. I can see assignments that I've assigned maybe to a different class that I want to also reuse in this group as well, and I can assign those. And then I can create a new assignment. So from here, one of the big advantages to this, instead of just choosing the easy assign to class option, is that I can pull multiple assignments in here. So just click that little search option, and then let's say I'm doing a unit on mass, matter, and volume. And then I'd search. What do we have as options? Okay, we'll pull the questions from chemistry, and it added that question bank, that practice into my concept, or that concept into my practice for my students. If I wanted to add another one, let's say I also wanted to work on like the difference between length and volume. Let's see what our options are. It looks like there's a chemistry one. Let's stick with chemistry. So I'm going to pick that choice as well. It's going to pull both of those options into my practice for my students. I can even add a quiz. These two are the simple adaptive practice. It says their goal is 10 correct on the first and 10 correct on the second. But I could add a quiz to this assignment. And you can see the quizzes we made today, including the one I nicely titled versus these general untitled ones. Or I could create a new quiz at this time and include it. But let's say I just added this quiz here. You'll see these are practice, that's my quiz. And then I can save this assignment, say demo for May 9th. And I can, if I want to, just assign it right off the bat to the class that I kind of was building it in, and add my due date. So let's say we'll make it due Friday. So I save that, and it's now in my assignments. If I was looking at these options, kind of what's where, this is the demo, the student would see multiple choices within here, and they would actually be able to go in and try any of that practice. And it would pop up some of the resources for it if you just wanted to see what it looked like. But when they clicked on it in their class environment to see what that looked like, And I can show that at some point if people have questions on that after. But they'll see all three options, and they can do them in any order, and do them separately with kind of the quiz grade for here, and then the general goal of the practice for 10 correct for the first parts. So then the question becomes kind of, what does this look like from a teacher perspective after I grade it? So all of your reports within CK12, if you're using CK12 classes, show up under the reports option. Here you'll see, okay, going fishing. I think this is actually a simulation. So one person has kind of accessed that simulation and turned it in. They just get a check mark in our system. If you were using a learning management system, they would get 100% if they did it correctly based on whatever grade you were looking at. If I went into practice, they'd start getting percentages out of the 10 correct. And then if I pull, let's say, a multi-concept assignment that they might have done already, here you'll see the score for both the first part of that assignment and the score for the second part of the assignment. And you can actually go all the way into this. So let's say I want to look at how the student was doing. And our original groups in practice webinar went into depth on this, but you can see kind of the general information, the level of questions they got, and then even the questions that they answered incorrectly and correctly as they worked their way through. So you'll see kind of those marks all the way down. You can drill all the way down in those reports to the level of the questions and how that student was doing. But in general, I would say the quick assign option, just that assign to class straight from whatever you're working with, works pretty well. It's only if you happen to kind of want to string together a series of concepts in one full assignment with a single due date that you'd want to be able to do this. It is currently only available to put together both practice and quizzes. You can't currently string together kind of all these different modality parts. We are working on a number of options as we move forward that we'll start probably previewing this summer, but definitely keep that in mind as you're building. So I think that's kind of the general piece from here. I know we have some different parts as we're working our way through. Feel free to keep asking questions of us, but I think we're going to wrap up some of the core parts of our webinar, and then we will stay on and answer any other questions. If you want to see anything else reviewed again, please feel free to just continue to ask as we go.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and steal the screen back and share with you a few additional pieces of information that I think would be helpful. And then as you're digesting all of this, start typing in your final questions into the Q&A window. This page here, ck12.org/tools and apps. We've referenced several times that you can do our practice on our CK12 practice app, which is available for iPhone, iPad, Android devices. We also have a physics simulation app. And for those of you who are interested in Flexbooks, we also have an offline reader for your Flexbook. So you can learn more about that at Tools and Apps. We also do have some learning management system partnerships. We integrate with Edmodo and Google Classroom, Schoology, and Canvas. We have a lot of resources on our site under the Help tab. You see the Help tab several places on our landing page and across our site. You can go there for some more information about our various integrations. We are wrapping up our webinars for what is kind of our US school year here on May 22nd. This is going to be the last one just for a couple months anyway of our school year webinars. This is called Everything CK12. Today was a very specific topic on customizing practice, but if you want the general overview to learn all about all of the resources we offer, Everything CK12 is kind of that rapid, comprehensive tour of our entire site. So that's on May 22nd. And then we want to encourage you guys all to join us this summer. We are doing a certified educator program again for our second year. And that's where we're going to have a lot of webinars and sessions that you can join us for just for a couple of sessions, or we hope you would consider being certified. And so in our footer on CK12 or at ck12.org/certified, you would click and land on this page, which gives you some information about our program. We answer some frequently asked questions on here. We've got a tab where you can view some of our alumni and see, who's been certified in areas around you by filtering by location. And then we've launched just a pre-registration. If you want to make sure that you're in the loop with all the information coming up about the Certified Educator Program, you can give us your name and email address, and we'll make sure you're on the list of interested participants. And then probably next week, we are hoping to launch the specific sessions, dates, and times where you can register for the individual sessions that you're wanting to attend this July with us. So again, this page, ck12.org/certified, is going to give you a lot more information than I just gave you about our program, but we hope you're as excited about it as we are. At the end of every webinar, we always give you an opportunity to give us some feedback. We read all of your feedback and try to improve a webinar each and every time we do them. You can go to this tiny URL. We're going to chat it out in the chat window. But if you have just a couple of minutes to answer a few questions and let us know how we can continue to improve these webinars, we would really appreciate it. And again, here's a couple of email addresses for you. support@ck12.org will get you to our awesome support team to help you with any questions you may have. And then you can find us on all of the socials at CK12 Foundation. So for those of you who need to head off the webinar, you're welcome to go ahead and leave us for today. You guys who still have questions, stay on, and we're going to continue to answer questions until there aren't any more questions to answer. So Katie, back to you. What's happening in Q&A?
Hi, so we had a question about what stuff looks like for a student. So let me just share a student account to start. So if I do that, you guys can hopefully see this groups option for a student. So if I opened up that grades, they still get kind of the same, okay, these are my assignments, options here, and they would say, okay, well, this new assignment is coming up. And the same deal is here, but they could just start it and they could work on that assignment. The practice looks identical to what you see. So if they click start practicing, they see the same thing you would see if you previewed this quiz. So that is identical. You don't really need to see that differently from a student view versus a teacher view. But if I closed out of this, you'll see that they have for this particular assignment, in addition to kind of this part, the starting option. So I could switch over and say, I want to start the next one on length and volume, and they could choose to do them in any order. But the practice option for what they see within it is identical. So there's not really a way to switch over and see that part. So hopefully that gives you an idea for what a student looks like. They still see that list of assignments. They can see their completed assignments if they've done work already, and go back in and look at those. And the reports are for any work that they have done themselves. So they can actually drill down and see what they've done and how that works out. So with that, let me just switch back to the teacher account. So hold on 2 seconds. We will switch over there. And then I can continue to answer questions within the teacher account. So hopefully you can see that. So we did have a question about price for schools. Everything CK12 offers is 100% free to our users. So there is no price tag attached to using these resources. Just log in and you can see all of these options. And then we had a question in terms of individualized feedback for questions. So let me go back into this for a second and create a new question. We'll just make this, oops. If I create a new quiz or a new question within a quiz, let's just create a new question from here. You can, if you're putting in multiple choice, if I do this and I say the correct answer, and then I do kind of distractors, you should be able to add, well, let me rephrase that. You used to be able to add feedback in here. Here it is. Just switch the feedback to on. And then you could add, if let's say this distractor was simply like they forgot a negative sign, don't forget to distribute your negative. So you can add kind of those pieces as feedback for answers within a multiple choice, but not necessarily like all students would get the same feedback. So it's not individualized per student, it's more individualized per answers. But just turn that feedback option on. There were questions about kind of the solution being different. So the solution would be something that if I did kind of that whole written out like solution set would have all of the steps to a problem. And in general, they're not going to see that a lot. They're going to see it if you choose to turn it on at a quiz, or kind of the lower grades usually see that just when they're doing practice. So it's something like where if they answered a question and then they get to see like, oh, that's how I messed it up, I can work my way through. But the difference between the answers and the solution is kind of the whole worked out step-by-step solution for a problem. And then we had a question about how much of this is visible in Canvas. So you would want to create quizzes or customize content on CK12 itself. And then if you're in a learning management system such as Schoology or Canvas, you could assign those quizzes kind of as individual modalities within the environment by accessing them through your library on Canvas or on Schoology within CK12. And so the multi-concept assignment, the kind of stringing together multiple parts, is only available within the CK12 environment. But if you created a customized quiz and wrote your own questions, you could also assign that within a learning management system or send it directly to Google Classroom. So if I was in here and I wanted to assign to class, you can assign directly to a class within CK12 or to Google Classroom. So those are options kind of from there. So it looks like we may be out of questions at this time. We'll give you a minute to kind of see if there's anything else that came through. But definitely let us know if you have questions. If you have feedback on study groups, please feel free to chat or email Jumpstart or support, and we'll pass that along to our team. And otherwise, yeah, let's just see kind of if there's anything else for a second or two, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Well, we don't seem to be getting any other questions coming in. So if you do realize you forgot to ask a question, feel free to email us. And we will be back on with a general CK12 webinar in 2 weeks, and then our summer program this July. It looks like there is a question about variables. Let me pull it up briefly, just so you can see what that looks like. There's usually one person that asks about this at some point in time in these webinars. So if I create the variables part, I'm going to add a variable, let's say X. I want it to be chosen from a set. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or I could do a range and say starting from 1 to 5 as integers. And then I could hit add. And what it does is it adds this variable, and I would just drag that in wherever I wanted. And I could say that number plus, let's say I'm going to add another variable, which is y, and then I want to choose this from a different set. Let's say 2, 4, 6, 8, and I can drag that in. And then I want the answer to be x plus y. But then you get the complicated part, which is why it kind of requires a lot of time to create these more algorithmic questions, is that then you have to put in the distractors that don't equal that. So it may be easier to just say, okay, I want this to be a short answer question, where my answer is x plus y, and then that's nice and simple and sweet. It's where you have to start doing like, okay, well, I want x plus 2y, but making sure that that's not like the choice. So you get to be a little creative as you work your way through. But in terms of the like mechanics of doing it, you just click add a variable, and then you pick your requirements and your options, and then you just, once it's added here, you drag it into your question, and we go from this. You want to preview this particular question? Sure. So if I submit this, and I preview this question, right now it says 2 plus 2, so my answer would be 4. If I try it again, and now it says 2 plus 8, my answer would be 10. If I try it again, check it, oops. Let's say I did 9. It'll say I got the wrong answer. And it'll just keep regenerating new numbers for this. So in this case, if you build a question with those variables, it means that each student or each attempt that a student makes at this particular question will give it a different number as you work your way through. Okay, so hopefully that gave you just a beginning part. It can be definitely fun to play around with that, but you have to be specific in terms of what you're choosing to put as the distractors if you start doing something like that. But yeah, please feel free to contact us with any questions. And otherwise, we will be on again in a couple weeks. Have a great evening, everyone, or morning, or wherever you are.